Good morning, church. My name is Josh. I'm one of the pastors here. I've made an observation the last couple of weeks that I just want to bring you all in. I was looking around the room last week, and I think it was probably maybe like 25 to 35% of the people that I did not even recognize. In other words, we're in the dog days of summer, so it's very unusual to see faces that you don't recognize coming week after week after week, but it has been the case. And so I just want to say, if you're brand new, if this is your second or your third week, hey man, you're already on the team, all right? We need you to welcome the new folks that are coming as well. So if you feel like you haven't been welcomed, it might just be some echo chamber things happening in here where everyone is just a little bit new and we don't know if the other people are new or not. So I just want to encourage you. If it seems like Anchor is becoming your home, your family, man, join us. Number one, we'd love to have you upstairs today for the open house. We'll eat together and you can hear a little bit about the church. And then number two, just would love to have you being a part of the welcoming fabric of our church family. I would love it if Anchor was just the most welcoming, the warmest church in Hampton Roads. We ought to be. The Father has welcomed us through the person and work of Jesus. That is the warmest, best welcome there is, a gospel welcome. And we ought to mirror that in our own church family. And so whether you've been here for 10 years or 10 times, or this is your first time, we love that you're here. Help us create a welcoming culture that mirrors the Father and Son's welcome to us as members of his family. All right, glad to have you here this morning. If you have any questions about anything that you observed today, man, track me down afterwards. I'd love to speak with you about that, answer any questions that you might have. When I was a freshman in college, I played intramural basketball. Each team had a coach, but most of the teams had what's called a player coach, which is exactly like it sounds. This guy both played and he coached, all right? And because of the fact that he was a player coach, he never really had a great sideline view of what was going on the court. You know, he's kind of out there with us, sweating with us, losing a lot with us. He was kind of stuck at eye level in all the chaos, just like we were, and yet he had the title of coach. There were no scouting reports, no view from the bench. He just winged it every single game, all right? Did his best. We were a decent team that year. We played in a lot of close games, which means there were a lot of timeouts called at the end of these close games, trying to help us figure out a way to get over the top finally and get a win in one of these very close games. And I will never forget this coach. He'd call timeout in like the biggest moment of the game, no problem with that. That's exactly what he should do as our player coach, right? He'd call timeout, and then we would huddle up. We'd be, sweating like crazy, looking for answers. What are we supposed to do next, coach? But like I said, he was out on the court with us, right? No real bird's eye view as to what was going on, what the other team was throwing at us, and how we were failing. And so his insights weren't all that helpful. And this, I kid you not, this was the entirety of his coaching every time we called a timeout, all right? He would get down on his knee just like this, and he'd look at all of us surrounding him. He'd look at us up in the eyes with like fire in his eyes, and he'd go, "Guys, come on! Guys, let's go!" Like over and over again. You think I'm overstating it, but I'm not, I promise you. That was the extent of his coaching prowess right there. His whole coaching strategy, just vibes, man. That's all that he had. He was trying to push us over the top just with a little bit of enthusiasm, which was great. I left that huddle totally hyped very many times with the guys' "come on, rah-rah" speech. I just had no idea what I was supposed to do once I came out of that huddle, right? No plays were given, no strategy offered. What was I supposed to do on offense? Where was I supposed to go on defense? Nobody knows. A whole row, though, if you were to watch March Madness, a whole row of assistant coaches you will see all along the line. You ever watch March Madness and see all those teams, see all those grown men on that bench? They all have full-time salaries to watch these young men play basketball and to track stats and to track strategy and to teach and coach throughout the game. And so imagine the contrast between my coach. His name was Josh. I swear it was not me, okay? Imagine Coach Josh compared with all of these coaches that you see on TV, particularly during the month of March, during March Madness. And they all, or at least the head coach, will have a little whiteboard with a little court printed on this whiteboard. And it's where they draw up their plays. It kind of looks like this. Maybe some of you have seen them before. And so coach is drawing up a play, something that looks like this. college coach is drawing up a play that looks something like this. What to do, when, why, how. Those players walk out of those huddles with somewhat of a better understanding of what they were supposed to do than we walked out of our huddle in college. They walked out with knowledge and not just hype, not just vibes. And it makes a huge difference in the quality of play that you observe on TV versus what you would have seen on my college team. But you actually need both in a coach. You need some rah-rah, you need some vibes, and you need some strategy. You need the guy who knows when to rah-rah his team when they are feeling down and they just need some encouragement, and you need the guy who knows when to slow down, to tell you exactly what the enemy, what the bad guys, what the other team is throwing at you, and to know how to counter their attack. The best coaches know how to do both of those things. So let me just stretch this metaphor a little bit, if you will allow me to. We want to do both of these things here at Anchor Church. We want to do both because Jesus did both of these things. He had both of these kinds of approaches. So 2 weeks ago, for example, we had one of those rah-rah Sundays that was super sweet and special. It's something that probably doesn't come across the YouTube feed, but if you were here in this space with us, you know it was a sweet gathering with the Spirit of God powerfully moving among the people of God for the glory of God. It was a really sweet time. And I left that Sunday huddle with like a big case of the rah-rahs, right? I was fired up. It was such a sweet and special Sunday. But then you come to a text like last week's, which Josh Earls covered for us, or this week's, like Josh Hurst is going to cover for us. And it's like one of those timeouts where you got to kind of slow down. And you got to really analyze the strategy of what is going on. So get your whiteboards out this morning, all right? We're going to figure out what play Jesus is running because it's honestly not super clear on the surface. Maybe you weren't super clear on what was happening when Cameron read the text for us. I know how it feels because I sat with the text all week long. It's tempting to look at a text like this and go, let's just skip that one, right? Let's get back to the rah-rah stuff because this is complicated. Because in this text, Jesus is going to say something to a desperate mom that would get him canceled in today's society by lunchtime. I promise you. But if we skip the hard texts, we will not be as good of a team as we could be. And we won't be able to throw as many haymakers for the kingdom as we ought to be able to throw here at Anchor Church. And so we do. We want to take this moment to slow down, to analyze the play the enemy is running and the counter that Jesus is running, because there's way more going on here that meets the eye. So get your whiteboards out and let's go. Look at verse 24 with me. And from there, he arose and he went away to the region of Tyre and Sidon. Now, if you're not careful, we've already missed something gigantic that's happening right here in the text. So get that whiteboard out, because Jesus has just walked off the map of the ancient world. He is running a brand new play that has never been seen before. Tyre and Sidon is enemy country, if you are not familiar with your New Testament or with the Christian Bible. This is the coastland of the Phoenician Empire, which is why the lady here is called a Syro-Phoenician. So Jesus has walked to the old Phoenician Empire, which again probably means nothing to most of us in here, but let me try to help us out. Do you know who else from the Old Testament was from this region? You'll recognize this name. Queen Jezebel was from this region. The woman who had hunted down the prophets of God and had killed them. This is her home turf. The prophet Joel says that Tyre sold the children of Judah into slavery. They lost everything that they worked all their lives for because of the rulers and the leaders in this region. It was not a happy place for them, not filled with happy memories for their ancestors. So hear me, to a first century Jew who is hearing and seeing that Jesus is walking off the map into this general area, they know that Tyre is not a neutral zip code. They get that. Tyre is enemy territory. So it's no small thing that Mark is dropping this into the narrative. It would have been a very unique move for someone like a rabbi like Jesus to pursue. So Mark is telling us something pretty massive about Jesus right here that actually has lingering effects in this very moment, in this very room right now, all the way here in 2026. So maybe it'll help us to put this in a little bit of modern terms for us this morning. So those of us who remember living through 9/11, imagine hopping on a flight to Osama bin Laden's hometown, walking down Main Street and expecting a parade and what's going on in that city. And feel how like wrong that feels in your soul based on what you saw on that screen all those years ago and the feelings you felt of fear and probably anger. Feel how wrong that feels. These people hate you. They hate all that you stand for. They hate your flag. They hate your country. They hate your God. Nobody wanders into a place like that by accident. You have to choose to go into a place like that. You only go on purpose. That's Tyre, and that's what Jesus walked into. And that's the whiteboard moment for us, because this isn't random. And there really isn't rah-rah here. There's no hype or vibes. Jesus, though, is running a really highly strategic play here, because the places we would never go are actually the places that Jesus is drawn to. And he goes there on purpose. This is the missionary heart of God on full display. And just by the way, God has actually run this play, this very same play before. 1,000 years earlier in your Old Testaments, during the great drought, God sent the prophet Elijah out of Israel, off the home turf, to a starving Gentile widow who had a son. So we're with a Gentile woman right now who has a daughter who is demon-possessed. 1,000 years before, there's a Gentile woman who has a dying son. Do you know where she lived? Probably not. She lived in a place called Zarephath, which is in the region of Sidon. This exact coastland that Jesus is walking through right now. And here's why that even matters. Let me give you some context here. In Luke chapter 4, Jesus is preaching his very first sermon of his ministry. And hear what he has to say here, talking about this Elijah character and this woman. He says, "In truth, I tell you that there were many widows in Israel in the days of Elijah." So many widows on the home turf right there in Israel, when the heavens were shut up 3 years and 6 months and a great famine came over all the land. And Elijah was sent to none of them, but only to Zarephath in the land of Sidon, to a woman who was a widow. So catch what Jesus is saying here. Israel was full of needy widows. There's plenty of women in there who could have used help. And God sent his prophet past all of them to another widow outside of the boundaries of their country, to a foreign widow in Sidon. And I want you to see, this is the important part. Look at how the congregation who Jesus is preaching to, listen and watch to how they respond in the next couple of verses. When they had heard these things, that he was sent past the hometown widows and into the home of this foreign widow, when they had heard these things, all in the synagogue were filled with wrath. And they rose up and drove him out of town and brought him to the brow of a hill on which their town was built so that they could throw him off the cliff. Jesus' first sermon almost got him killed. And so what's the big deal here? Because Jesus is telling insiders, the Pharisees that Josh covered for us last week, he's telling the insiders that God has always had his eye on the outsiders. This is an important thing to understand about the missionary heart of God seen in the person and work of King Jesus. This is good news for you and me, that God has always had a heart for the outsider, because we are the outsiders. It's good news for you and me, but some of the ancient Jews, they hated this. They wanted to be the special and only people of God. So when Jesus shows up into enemy territory, what kind of person finds him? Check it out in verse 25. But immediately a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit heard of him and came down and fell at his feet. So again, another Gentile mother and another child in trouble. And Mark gives us her resume in verse 26. Check it out. The woman was a Gentile, a Syro-Phoenician by birth. So it's hard to see on the surface here for us in modern day America what Mark is doing, but he's basically stacking up her disqualifications on her resume. He's proving to you that this woman had no worth in this society, the very bottom. She's a Gentile, wrong nation. She's Greek, wrong culture, wrong religion. She's Syro-Phoenician, which means she had the wrong bloodline. She is a daughter of Israel's ancient enemies, like Jezebel that we talked about a minute ago. So she has no covenant, she has no credentials, and she has no claim to really come to this Jewish rabbi and ask for anything from him. So if access to Jesus, in fact, runs on qualifications, this woman is probably the least qualified person to come to Jesus in the entire Gospel of Mark. It's that serious. But she's got one massive thing that is motivating her to come and follow at the feet of Jesus. She has one thing that is making her willing to overcome all of these obstacles, and it's her little girl being tortured by a demon. And if all this demon talk sounds a little strange to you or out of the norm, we did cover this idea way back in the beginning of our Mark series and why in today's society it may seem like, at least superficially, that there's less demonic work going on. So I'll just point you back to the early parts of our series in Mark if you want to kind of dig into a little bit of that. But this mom is out of options, right? She's tried what she can try, and she's come up empty. Matthew tells us, another gospel writer, another biographer of Jesus, tells us that when she came like crying out. She is loud, she is desperate, and she is relentless. She will not give Jesus any peace. Matthew even tells us the disciples, it got so bad that the disciples begged Jesus. They're like, send her away. She keeps shouting at us. She was annoying. But on behalf of her daughter, she's desperate. She is making a scene. But desperate people don't care about decorum, do they? They just need help. Listen, if you are here and you are suffering through something in silence, can you lose the decorum this morning? Just lose it. Come begging for help. If you are wrestling with an addiction that is killing you, man, we got you. We will come alongside of you. We will limp with you. There will be up days and there will be down days, but we will be with you all the days. In Jesus' name, for the glory of Jesus. We will put you in a position to be helped. But don't think that you're maintaining your dignity by maintaining secrecy. You are not. Lose the decorum and come to Jesus, the warmest gospel welcome you could ever imagine. Notice what Matthew records this woman shouting. Matthew 15:22. Have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David. So this pagan woman from Jezebel's home country has better theology than the Pharisees did from last week. Think about that. The Pharisees, the insiders, the guys who had it together and were at the top rung of their society. The guys with credentials, robes, and resumes. The guys who memorized the scriptures that predicted the coming of the Son of David, that this woman is now addressing Jesus with this title. He was standing right in front of them. And they called him, these guys called Jesus demon-possessed. So you got these insiders. And then you got this outsider. Wrong nation, wrong culture, wrong bloodline, wrong everything. And she looks at Jesus and said, Son of David, have mercy. I need your help. Please. Do you see what's happening, church family? The insiders are on the outside, and the outsider is pressing her way inside. This is the kingdom of God. The insiders, the people who feel like they've got it all together, are out. And the outsiders, the people who know that they don't. We don't belong in that family. We don't belong at that table with Jesus. Those are the kinds of people that Jesus brings into the kingdom to sit with him at the table. This woman is outside of everything, outside of covenant, outside the nation, and outside the bloodline, and yet she is about to be in. So in God's economy, you need to understand this. The outsiders who come humbly to Jesus end up inside the kingdom, and the insiders who trust their own credentials end up outside of the kingdom. What category would you put yourself in there this morning? Trusting in your own grit, your own pull yourself up, your own blue-collar work ethic, or trusting in the credentials of another, the righteous Son of God? So now watch this happen in real time in the text. This mama makes her request on behalf of her daughter. Have mercy on me. My daughter is severely oppressed. And watch what Jesus says in verse 27. He said to her, let the children be fed first, for it is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. Dogs. If you're not like tracking with Jesus' line of reasoning here, he's calling this woman a dog, okay? So we can't quite wiggle out of this yet. This is a significant thing that we got to wrestle with this morning. I think this woman just made a very reasonable request to somebody who has the power to change her daughter's situation. Very reasonable. Begging for her demonized daughter to be freed. She came to the right person and she made the right request. And then Jesus responds and he uses a metaphor that references her in the dog position, right? There's a child, there's a table, and there's a dog. And she gets called a dog. If you're not at least a little bit uncomfortable right now, you're probably just not reading the same Bible that I am. The skeptics have circled these verses for thousands of years, using this as some kind of evidence against the deity of Jesus. Maybe you've been put in an uncomfortable position as you've read this text yourself. Maybe you're sitting in here thinking, man, this is not the sweet, gentle Jesus that I remember from my Sunday school years, right? Calling a woman a dog. What gives? What is going on here? If that's your spot, you're in a good spot because we're ready to get the whiteboard out and go to town here, okay? Because there is more going on here than meets the eye. First, catch that word, first. He says, let the children be first fed. So first is not never. If you eventually get fed, that's not you never getting fed. First means that this woman is second, or the dogs are second, right? In the Old Testament, Israel is kind of referred to as God's kid, God's child, God's son. And the plan was always to get the gospel to the Jew first and then to the Greek. It's always been like that, to the Jews first and then to the rest of the world. That's been the story from the very beginning of time. Jesus is not saying that the dogs don't ever get fed. It's not what he's saying. He's saying that the meal has an order. It starts with somebody and then you pass the plate, right? And the order is about to reach this woman. So notice that he says first, and then second, catch the word, and you can't see it in your English translation, but I'm going to help you catch the word that Jesus uses for dogs, okay? This is an important thing. Because in that world, dog was the standard slur for a Jew to use against anybody who was not a Jew, right? They felt some of them felt very smug about their heritage, and so they would call people who did not share that heritage a dog. And they meant the wild kind of dogs. That's what the Greek word would render. The mangy scavengers prowling streets in packs like out at the city dump. That's what Jews meant when they called other races dogs. Not kind, right? But this is not the word that Jesus uses here. Like I said, you probably can't see it in your English rendition, but Jesus uses a different word altogether. It's the word for little dogs, like puppy dogs, house dogs, the puppies that show up underneath the family dinner table with those eyes that are begging for whatever's on top of the table, right? And this really would have stuck out, I think, to the original hearers who are hearing Jesus talk to this woman, particularly the disciples that are with him. This would have stuck out because they would have expected him to use a different word. They would have expected him to use this scavenger, mangy kind of dog word. They would have expected the slang. It was normal to send out an insult like this. But this is not the word, again, that Jesus uses. Some of you remember maybe the show American Idol back in the day. I think it's tried to make a few comebacks. I don't know if it's back right now or not. But you had Simon, you had Paula, and then you had Randy Jackson, right? Remember the Randy Jackson judge? Do you remember Randy's signature line? That's going to be a no from me, dog. Yeah, you guys know. It's going to be a no from me, dog. This man just called a contestant a dog, right? On national television, live TV, sometimes, in front of 30 million people. Randy, what are you doing, bro? Well, we know that dog didn't mean dog, right? D-A-W-G is not the same thing as D-O-G, right? Dog didn't mean dog. Dog meant friend, right? Or bro. I see you, I am for you, but next contestant, right? Same animal on paper, but a completely different word in that room and on your TV set. I think that's a little bit of what's happening here in this verse. The normal insult meant the pack of strays outside of the city dump. And listen, the Bible does know that word. It is very familiar with that word for that kind of dog, and it uses it throughout the scriptures. Every other time your New Testament says dog, it's the insult word. But this story right here is the only place in your whole New Testament where the little puppy word shows up. And I think that's significant. Jesus saved this word for her. And here's the kicker. I stumbled upon this last week. Most Jewish homes did not keep like house dogs, pet dogs. I have 8 dogs in my house right now, and I wish I had a Jewish home, let me tell you, with no dogs. Greek homes kept pet dogs. Jewish homes did not. It's not easy, again, to see this on the surface, but this is Jesus kind of reaching into her world. to give her a picture that she wouldn't have otherwise have had. So think about what this means. Jesus built this one-time illustration that he would never use for the Jews that he mostly ministered to. He built this one-time story to reach into her culture and into her heart and explain something to her, right where she was at. A dog under the table was a picture the Pharisees would not have much familiarity with. But she'd seen it 100 times, maybe in her house, in her neighbor's house, the kids at the table, the little dog underneath, and the crumbs coming down. So this is not a rabbi being careless with a hurting woman. This is a teacher being very surgical with this woman. Even the very hard word was tailored for her experience. But now listen, even with all of this true, let's just assume all of that is true. The softer word for puppy, like in this metaphor, who would you prefer to be? The kids at the table or the dog under the table? He's still kind of being a little bit insulting right here, even with all of what we kind of, the context that we just baked in. We'd still all rather be the children. But here's the thing about a hard word from the Son of God. A hard word only insults you if it isn't true. When the doctor tells you that a life habit is killing you, that's not an insult, that's a diagnosis. And the diagnosis is the door to the cure. The sobering reality for this woman is that she was not a child of the covenant. She was not at the family table. That's not slander. That's just like what the numbers on her chart were saying. And watch her, because she doesn't even quibble for 1 second about the diagnosis that Jesus gives to her. It's remarkable. She accepts it, the dog label. And then immediately she asks for the cure. Look at verse 28. Yes, Lord, I know. Yet even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. Now, I love this lady. I love her courage. I love her spunk. I love her faith. She does not defend her resume, not even a little bit. She says, yes, Lord, you're right. I have no claim. I got no credentials. I do not belong with you. I'm not even asking for a seat at the table. Just give me some crumbs. I've watched dinner at the house with the kids. The little dogs don't starve underneath the table because the crumbs fall. And if you are Jesus, who I believe that you are, I think your crumbs, even your crumbs, are enough for me and my sick baby girl back home. How is she able to be this resilient after being called a dog? I'll tell you why. She did not come to Jesus for validation. She came for bread. This is an important distinction for all of us to wrestle with this morning. This is a watershed for you in your heart. You will come to Jesus for validation, or you will come for bread. And I hope you come to Jesus for bread. If you come to Jesus needing him to affirm you, one hard word will send you home offended. And Jesus has lots of hard words for you and for me. But if you come to him starving, even his hard words are going to feel and smell and taste like warm bread to you. And church, let's just be honest about the culture the cultural waters that we are all swimming in right now. We live in a culture that has exactly one gospel right now: affirmation. They want you to love who you are and not reject any of it. You are perfect just the way you are. Don't let anybody tell you different. Live your truth. Sleep with whoever, nobody can judge you. Chase the money, however, you deserve it. Cut off anybody who tells you hard truth. Man, that's toxic. Protect your peace, bro. Nobody in that crowd ever gets a diagnosis, man. They never are willing to hear the diagnosis. So nobody in that crowd ever gets a cure. You either come to Jesus for validation or you come for bread. Come to Jesus for bread. This woman got something infinitely better than affirmation. She got the bread of life that will satisfy her not only in this life, but all the way into the next one. Look at verse 29. Jesus responds, for this statement, for your faith, you may go your way. The demon has left your daughter. And so the woman goes home, and her little girl is lying on the bed, free, the demon gone. And so let's step back here for a second and look at the play that Jesus just ran. Jesus didn't handle this woman in the way that he handled anybody else in the Gospels. It was a very nuanced play just for her. Every step of it was drawn up for her. The hard word revealed her humility. The illustrations that he tapped into for her, We're circling around her context and culture. Unlike the disciples back in the last chapter in the boat that we covered a few weeks ago, Jesus isn't running the rah-rah hype play here. It's different. He gave her exactly what she needed, and he will do the same for you. Jesus tailors care for humble outsiders. Before we can cross into the next scene here in our text, let me tell you why everything you just saw is the best news in the room this morning. Because if the door to the kingdom is based on your credentials, every single one of us ought to be stuck out in the parking lot right now, right? None of us has the resume. We just don't. None of us has the bloodline. Romans says there is no distinction, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. We just can't get there. No matter how hard we fight and climb and scrape to get to where we ought to be with God, we can't. It's a sobering reality. Nobody in this room is qualified in and of themselves. But because the door is open for humble outsiders, it means no one is disqualified from getting through the door if you come the right way. Your past does not disqualify you. Your family of origin does not disqualify you. That thing that you did in your past that you've never told anybody that is your deepest place of shame does not disqualify you if you come through the only way, the truth, and the life, Jesus. The only thing that can keep you out of the kingdom is the kind of attitude that was put on display by the Pharisees last week that Josh covered. Thinking you don't need it, thinking you just wash up the outside and like that puts you in a good spot with the Father. All right, let's keep rolling with Jesus here in Mark's travel log. Look at verse 31. Then he returned from the region of Tyre and went through Sidon to the Sea of Galilee in the region of the Decapolis. Now, I pulled a map together here for us, okay? Because Mark has been drawing something across the chapters, I think, that will be easier to see from a 10,000-foot view, from the air. I know it's probably a little bit hard for you to see maybe the further back you are, but let me just try to walk you through this map real quick, okay? The first stop there is on the northeast shore. That's where the feeding of the 5,000 Jews that happened a few weeks ago in our series. We covered that. And think about this. That is the kids at the table eating first. Those are Jesus feeding the Jews first there at the table. No crumbs have fallen yet. But as Jesus moves off the map, the crumbs of the gospel are going to come tumbling down to people like you and me. The second stop is in the Sea of Galilee. That was like a rah-rah moment in the middle of the Sea of Galilee when Jesus steps up into the boat with them. They land in Gennesaret, and then Jesus walks into enemy territory from there, up there towards the top of your map, or in the middle top of your map. And it's there that a Gentile mother begs for crumbs from the children's table and goes home to a delivered daughter. So for the first time on our map, for the first time in the history of the world, the bread has crossed the border. The next stop is Sidon, all the way at the top of your map, even further north. And this is actually the deepest into Gentile territory that Jesus ever goes. At least that's recorded for us in the Gospels. And this trip is the thing that should make us kind of squint at the map. Because Jesus, according to the text, is allegedly, he's trying to get home. He's heading back to Galilee. But look at the path he takes, all the way there around the Sea of Galilee. So Jesus is supposedly heading home, and his home is south. But in verse 31, he goes north through Sidon, and he's going the wrong direction, right? This is like me trying to leave from here to go to a Commanders game by way of an Eagles game, okay? All right? So you go through Philadelphia to get to Washington, which is really the right order when you think about it, right? Eagles first, then Commanders, but I digress, okay? And so nobody does this on accident. Nobody goes to Philly to go to Washington. Nobody goes to Tyre and Sidon to go back to Galilee, which tells you that Jesus' trip was never about getting home efficiently, because look at the top of the map. From Sidon, Jesus swings east, he crosses over, and he comes all the way down the far side of the sea into the area of the Decapolis. That's like, Decapolis is a fancy word for the 10 Greek cities. Deca is a word that means 10. Polis is a word for cities, so 10 cities. It's kind of like Hampton Roads is the area of the 7 cities, same kind of idea. And it's here in the Decapolis that they bring him a deaf man. Now, again, we got to stand back and look at this whole map at once. And I want to tell you where this is headed and just steal a little bit of Cameron's thunder for next week, because this is in next week's sermon. Chapter 8, the next chapter, opens right here in the Decapolis. And Jesus and the Decapolis, again, is outside of the Jewish map, right? It's foreign country. And so the scene opens in chapter 8, and Jesus feeds another enormous crowd, just like he did a couple chapters ago. 4,000 people at this time. Same miracle he did at stop 1, with one massive difference. This one happens on Gentile soil. The exact miracle he performed for the children, he now performs for the dogs. Mark is stitching these stories together on purpose. He's showing us something from 10,000 feet that is genuinely hard to see from the ground. So when you read verse by verse, it can sometimes be easy to just like wander around with Jesus and not really ever understand like the bigger play that's being run, a healing there, a conversation there, a strange route home. But from the air, there's a straight line running through all of these stops. Jesus is the world's first missionary. And we don't typically think of Jesus as being a missionary going outside of his country, but he does, and he's doing it here. And think about what this means for us. If Jesus never made the loop that you saw on that map, if the bread stays on Jewish soil, then the gospel never leaves Israel. It never reaches Rome. It never goes to Europe. It never sails across the Atlantic. And you and I are almost certainly not sitting here in Virginia Beach in 2026, seeing and savoring the King of the universe and just reveling in his gospel good news for us. You and I are here because Jesus went there to that Decapolis. It's a sobering thought, startling thought. And here's something really cool that we need to remember about the Decapolis, all right? Jesus has actually been there before. Maybe you remember a few weeks ago. You probably don't. Maybe you do. Back in Mark 5, we covered this together. Remember the man with a legion of demons up inside? He was living in the tombs. He was cutting himself with stones. Jesus set him free. He sent some pigs down into the sea, right? And you remember what the people of the region did once they saw all this chaos that Jesus had stirred up. They begged Jesus to leave. Get out of here, man. You're disrupting the whole economy. We can't stand having you here. So Jesus leaves. And do you remember what the healed man asked before Jesus left? He begged to come with Jesus. He's like, Jesus, can I please go with you? And Jesus says no. He sends him out on a missionary journey. He says, go home to your friends. He says, tell them how much the Lord has done for you. You were the dude in the cemetery, and now you've been given life. Go tell your friends. Let them see the change on you and in you. That was chapter 5. Now we're in the end of chapter 7, some weeks or months later, not sure which. And Jesus walks back into that same area, the Decapolis. And this time, nobody begs him to leave. It's a completely different experience. Instead, the exact opposite happens. A whole crowd is magnetically drawn to him. And they're carrying people to him, in particular this story. They're carrying this deaf man to him. So you see what happens in the small space between chapter 5 and chapter 7. The seed of that once demon-possessed man began to sprout and grow, and it grew quickly. One man's testimony turned a region that kicked Jesus out into a region that warmly welcomed him and begged his healing work to happen among them. This is exactly what we want in the 757. It is my heartbeat for the 757, in the 757, like it is in heaven, where Jesus is magnified, sickness and addiction are wiped clean. This is our dream, this is our hope, and this is our prayer. And it happens just like it happened in the Decapolis, through one of us, just telling someone else what Jesus has done in us, through us, and for us. This ought to be our story, Anchor Church. It's like this theme that we've been circling for weeks now. We are not a church just for ourselves. We are not a church that's merely designed to show up in this space on Sundays and then leave unaffected for the rest of our weeks. This is not the Sunday club. Jesus owns us 24/7. We are not a church just for ourselves. Who is the one that you're inviting here for an encounter with Jesus? I promise you, we'll do our best week in and week out to make Jesus accessible, to make Jesus clear. We will deal with the hard words sometimes, and we'll deal with the rah-rah text too, all right? But we're going to give them Jesus over and over and over again. Bring them. Bring them. Let's introduce our neighborhoods to Jesus. This is how the Decapolis flipped upside down. Look at verse 32. And they brought to him a man who was deaf and had a speech impediment, and they begged him to lay his hand on him. So let's slow down and look at this man. In the ancient world, particularly, This guy is cut off. Every conversation happens around him, over him, or without him. He's in the room, but not in the room. And here's the detail that we must not miss as a church. Hampton Roads absolutely cannot afford for us to miss this detail, church family. This man didn't come to Jesus. Look at your Bible. He didn't come to Jesus. Read it again. The text says they brought him to Jesus. That's a huge nuance and difference. Hold on to that for a minute. Look at verse 33 and watch Jesus work, all right? And taking him aside from the crowd privately, stop right there. Why private? Well, think about this man's life for a second. A crowd is the worst place for a deaf man. Everything happening around him, nothing explained to him. So Jesus takes him out of the crowd. He gets him alone, just Jesus and him. And now the strangest verse, and maybe all of Mark, but particularly in this chapter. Check it out. He put his fingers into his ears, and after spitting, he touched his tongue. This is weird, right? Are you tracking with me? So let's pause the game film here for a second. Let's analyze the play Jesus is running. To me, this is just one of those details that makes the Bible ring true to me. It's like sometimes we can have our doubts, right? But I think this really boosts my faith in the Word of God. Nobody making up a Messiah writes, and he put his fingers in the guy's ears and spits. Like nobody puts that down on paper. That's weird. If Mark is running a PR campaign for Jesus, that detail gets cut by lunch, right? We're not going to keep that in the story if we want to persuade people to follow Jesus. There's only one good explanation for why it's in your Bible. Because it happened. It happened. Weird as it is, it happened. And I think it's less weird than we might at first think. When you slow down, when you get the whiteboard out and actually analyze the play that Jesus is running, this weird detail becomes maybe the most special detail in all of our texts this morning. So let's slow down. Let's watch it unfold. Jesus just healed this woman's daughter at a distance. He never even meets the daughter. He only meets the mom and heals the daughter from a distance. Jesus doesn't need fingers. He doesn't need spit. He doesn't need to do any of that to heal. So what is he doing? Well, how do you communicate with a man who cannot hear you? How do you explain to him what you are about to do for him? You can't say, trust me, I got you. This is not going to hurt, but I'm going to help. Can't say that. Jesus speaks in the only language this man can receive, through touch. Fingers in the ears. Hey, I'm about to deal with these. A touch of the tongue. I'm about to fix this. I'm going to help you, man. I'm here for you. And then Jesus, he looks up to heaven like this. Why? I imagine the man following his eyes, following his gaze, and Jesus demonstrating for the man who can't hear where the power is coming from. It comes from the Father. He's demonstrating through sign language, through a gentle touch and a gentle sign that he is here to help this man. Think about this. Jesus is preaching to him through his fingers. A sermon in sign language. For the woman in Tyre, Jesus tailored his words, a test that revealed her faith. For this man, Jesus tailors his touch, his hands physically on the broken places on this man, his ears and his mouth. Jesus meets the woman, and Jesus meets the man, each inside their own specific limitation. Jesus does not show generic love. He demonstrates a very tailored care for the people he interacts with. Jesus is not a God who shouts like one size fits all, come on, from the sideline and expects it to do anything. And think about what the ears and tongue meant for this man. These are not just body parts to this guy. These are the broken parts of this guy. Those are the two things that made him the town project. The reason for every stare, every pointed finger, every exasperated frustration when they couldn't help him like they wanted to, every conversation that happened over his head like he wasn't there, his ears are the shame. And in that culture, nobody touches the broken part except for Jesus. You keep your distance in Jewish culture from the unclean thing. And the first thing Jesus does is he puts his fingers right there and he touches the shameful part, the most painful part. He draws near to it. The exact places this man spent his whole life wishing were different. Please heal me, God, are the exact places that Jesus makes contact. It's a special moment. And hear me this morning. This is not just the story of Jesus' healing of this man. That's the whole gospel in miniature. Because Jesus does not heal from a hazmat suit, right? He doesn't stand across from a room and look at what's wrong with you and just wave and wish you the best. The incarnation means that God put on skin himself and brokenness. And he moved into your contamination zone. And the cross means he put himself in the closest possible contact with all the worst parts about you and all the worst parts about me. The worst thing that you've done, the worst patterns that you've established, the worst addictions that you have. Jesus put himself in contact with that to rescue you from the consequences of that. Your sin, your shame, and the parts you hide. He absorbed the very thing that is killing you to give you life in his own body on the cross. The fingers in this man's ears are just a preview of the nails in Jesus' hands. And then verse 34, look what happens next. In looking up to heaven, he sighed. Some translations say that he groaned. It's like this deep, loaded breath. A man made for community but isolated for decades. And Jesus feels it. And he asks his Father to heal it. And then one word, Ephphatha. In verse 35, instantly his ears were opened, his tongue was released, and he spoke plainly. Verse 37, and they were astonished beyond measure. He's done all things well. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. The region that begged Jesus to leave is now throwing him a revival party. It's awesome. Bring that to the 757, I say, Jesus. The outsiders brought in and the insiders left out. And so now, as we bring this to a close, let's step all the way back and look at the two halves of this text side by side. Jesus tailors care for humble outsiders, and Jesus also tailors care for the ones that we carry, like this man had men and friends who brought him to Jesus. So think about this. This man's healing has fingerprints all over it that are not Jesus' fingerprints. Friends carried him. Friends begged for him. Friends stood in the gap that his ears and his tongue could not fill. Jesus tailored the healing, but the friends supplied the bringing. And so we've been in the film room together this morning, right? We've watched the play that Jesus ran in Tyre. We've watched the play he ran in the Decapolis. And now the timeout's almost over. Our Sunday huddle, right? We're about to break from the huddle, and we got plays to run. We can't just go out there with hype. We got to know what to do. So what are the plays that we are supposed to run coming out of this huddle together this morning? Whiteboard out one last time. First, play one, the carry, because notice something about both of these miracles. Neither person who got healed asked for it, at least not that it's recorded for us. The little girl never says a word in this story. She's not even in the scene. She's on a bed at home, tormented, helpless. Everything that happens for her happens because her mom advocated for her. Her mama would not shut up. The deaf man could not speak his own request. Everything that happens for him happens because they, his friends, brought him to Jesus. Two miracles, two people who could not advocate for themselves, and yet both were healed because they were carried. Two advocates who would not quit on behalf of their daughter and their friend. Church, we've got to hear this. Hampton Roads needs us to hear this. Some of the most important work you will ever do in the kingdom is you opening your mouth for somebody who can't or won't. The child waiting on adoption, whose whole future gets decided in rooms that he's not in. Maybe the Lord would spark in you a desire to look into the route of adoption. You become the voice in that room and that advocate. the kid in foster care today with nobody in his or her corner. We've got families who are blazing the trail for us as the Anchor family right now. If you want me to put you in contact with families that are blazing that trail, particularly in the foster world, let me do that for you. They are doing this very thing, living this out, advocating for kids who cannot advocate for themselves. The unborn who can't speak a single word in their own defense. We've got people in our church family who are devoted to that. If you want to know how to get on that with them and get on that team with them, let me connect you with them. You are the somebody to carry the others. You run the play. Play number 1, the carry play. So here's the whiteboard question. Who has God put in your life right now that just cannot get to Jesus on their own strength, or who needs someone to advocate for them? Is there anybody you're carrying? Is there anyone you're shouting for, trying to help? The name that came to your mind or that face, write it down today. Give yourself a deadline. Contact them by Friday. Don't leave this huddle with just hype. Leave with your assignment. But some of you are on the other side of this. You need a different play run for you. You need to be carried. You've been white-knuckling in it alone because asking for help feels like weakness. It feels humiliating to ask for help for the thing that you need to ask help for. And I have been there. I got brothers in this room that I have confessed things to that I needed help for, that I didn't feel like I should need help for. But come today. Would you change that? Would you run the second play? Would you let us carry you? We're all going to need to be carried at some point. Every last one of us. Look at the deaf man's stat line this morning. He didn't say one word. He didn't take one step on his own. He didn't do one impressive thing. He just let himself be brought. That's it. That is the whole play. And it was enough. It put him face to face with Jesus. So if that's you, your play this week is going to be one sentence. Humbling and sobering, but so hopeful. I need you to pray for me right now because I can't. Would you please help me? Please help. 2 words. Run the carried play. That is not weakness. That is the smartest play you could ever run. So just step over that threshold, maybe even this morning. In a minute here, we're going to bow our heads. We're going to release our prayer team members to the middle aisle, and they're going to be there for you, to pray over you, to lay a hand on your shoulder, to feel the touch, and hear from someone that is with you and for you. If you need someone that you know better or relationally involved with, we can connect you, obviously, with that. Get someone that you know in your life who will advocate for you. All of us fit in one of these 2 plays, all right? We are either the carriers or the carried. This week, there ought to be probably a little bit of both in your lives. So if the band would join me up here. And so as we go, I just want you to know that while Jesus tailored his care for this woman very specifically, and he tailored his care for this man very specifically, he tailors his care for you. And this is probably going to be like the biggest gulp of faith that you have to take this morning. Because some of you are up against it, man. You are up against very difficult odds with whatever it is. Maybe it's a business decision that you made. Maybe it's a move here that you didn't really expect or want to make. Maybe it's a sickness that you're facing. But I want you to know that Jesus is not unaware or aloof. He's not just saying, come on, from the sidelines, though he probably is saying that too. Whatever you're walking through right now, this exact season, the exact mess that you're in, is not outside of his control or his purview. Remember my old coach? He was just like stuck on the court with us, right? He didn't have that sort of sideline view and was able to take the whole thing in because he's out there with us, sweating, fouling, failing, losing. But Jesus is the coach who sees the whole court the whole time. This is why I think some of the plays that he calls feel and seem so strange to us sometimes from wherever you're standing. He's a coach with a vantage point that you simply do not have. He knows what you need, the humbling you need, the strength you need, the grace you need. And here's the part, like I said, that takes a little bit of faith to hear and digest. Sometimes his tailored care does not feel like tailored care. Ask the woman and this man from Mark 7. In both cases, the humbling came before the healing. It'll often be the case for us. The humbling will come before the healing. So if you're in a season right now that feels more like silence than help, if the fingers of providence are orchestrating something in your life right now that you just do not understand, that is not his absence. It might be the most tailored thing that he's ever designed for you. So hang in there and let us help carry you through that. And so here's the big idea. Jesus tailors his care for anyone humble enough to receive it. The outsiders who come humbly to Jesus end up inside the kingdom, and the insiders who trust their own credentials end up outside the kingdom. Trust the credentials of another, the finished work of the risen King. And this brings us to this table, because everything this morning has been about crumbs under a table. But look what's on this table. It's actually not crumbs, but a whole loaf pulled apart for efficiency this morning. It's the loaf. It's the bread of life. And here's what Jesus is saying to each one of us under the sound of my voice this morning. You don't have to live under the table. In Jesus' kingdom, there's no more Jew or Greek or Gentile or man or woman. We are all at the foot of the cross, level ground. You do not have to be under the table in any way, shape, or form. You do not have to spend your whole life hoping something falls under that table that you can snack on, settling for scraps of grace, close to the family, but never kind of seated at the family table. You get to come to the family table this morning, and it's the best. There is a seat at this table with your name on it. And I hope you enjoy the family meal this morning. The question is whether you'll take your seat at this table. And here's what it costs to seat you at this table. Don't get it twisted. Jesus took the outsider's place. He was the ultimate insider, and yet he went outside. He was cast outside the city. He was cut off from his people, cut off from life. His body broken like bread. His blood shed, poured out like the cup. So if you belong to Jesus this morning, come, eat and drink, come hungry. But if you have never come to Jesus with empty hands, let this opportunity for the table pass you this morning. Instead of coming to the table, come to Christ. If you're like, I have no idea what that means, man, then track down one of these prayer members. They're standing in the middle aisles toward the exits. They'd be happy to speak with you about that. Track me down. It would be an honor and the joy of my life to chat with you about this. But I urge you, if you find yourself in that category, don't settle for watching everyone else in here. Do what the woman did instead, right there in your seat. Get it down to 3 words. Lord, help me. That's it. And he will. He will. He's never turned that prayer away. A member of our prayer team now is going to come and sort of pray these things into our hearts and souls, and then come to the table. We'll eat and drink together.